What's going on, everybody, and welcome into the Brenden Schaeffer Fantasy Football channel. Back here with a Week 4 recap of the games that took place on Sunday. I'll be recording this here on Monday afternoon. Just going to kind of go through the league, see if anything jumps out at us from the week. This will just be sort of the preliminary conversation that we have about fantasy football as we move toward Week 5 and start thinking about the types of things that we have been talking about on this channel recently, like trade targets. It's going to be another week of buy low, sell high candidates that we will come up with on this podcast, on this YouTube channel. So make sure you subscribe to the Brenden Schaeffer Fantasy Football channel. Click that subscribe button, click like on this video, and let me know what you'd like to see from the channel this week. And of course, in the comment sections, as always, as we say for every video, you're welcome to throw your fantasy questions out there, whether it's trades, whether it's should you trade this player away, what could you get for him, all kinds of questions that you might have. We definitely dive into trade stuff as the weeks go along, so make sure you guys are asking those questions and looking forward to those videos. Let's go ahead and start with Thursday's recap, and then we will get into Sunday's game, try to get through these as quickly as we can. But how about the Lions taking it to the Green Bay Packers on Thursday night at Lambeau Field? David Montgomery is a thing. That is the takeaway from the Thursday night game, as David Montgomery, we weren't 100% sure earlier in the day Thursday whether he would be active for this game. Guess what? He was, and he had the lion's share of the workload. No Lions-related pun intended. 32 carries, 121 yards, and, of course, the 3 touchdowns made him a fantasy hero for the week. If you had Jahmyr Gibbs, as I do in many leagues, you were sad. Once again, 8 carries for 40 yards, so better efficiency than Montgomery. But Montgomery is the bowling ball. He is the short yardage back that Dan Campbell is going to love to continue to use. We're beginning to wonder why the Lions drafted Jahmyr Gibbs in the first place, but I am hopeful still that there will come a point in time later on in the season where the Lions aren't winning games by 2 or 3 touchdowns every time, and they're going to have to use Jahmyr Gibbs to try and play some catch-up, right? If they are trailing in a game, you would think that Jahmyr Gibbs would be the more oriented back to that game script rather than David Montgomery. We've just seen the Lions have a lot of early success, and they're leading their games, and so as a result, Montgomery has been the guy. I'll talk more about Jahmyr Gibbs as the week goes along, whether he is a buy low candidate or whether we should just start treating him like what he is, which right now is a complimentary back to David Montgomery in Detroit. But I'm still a big fan of Gibbs' talent, so that'll be an interesting one to wrestle with. Receiving-wise, Amon-Ra St. Brown had a fine day. Sam Laporta continuing to give you a nice floor at the tight end position, which is something that you haven't always been able to say about the TE spot. How about Jahmyr Gibbs, though, at least getting in on the reception game a little bit if you're in PPR? He didn't kill you this week. Josh Reynolds showing up a bit. Not a whole lot else to say about the Lions fantasy options. Jordan Love, not quite as good of a game as we have seen from him in terms of touchdown-interception ratio. Had just a couple of weird throws in this game. The running game was totally silent for Green Bay. We'll talk about some of those guys. I think Dillon is basically irrelevant for fantasy, but Aaron Jones could still be an interesting buy low candidate if we think that there could be more coming from him down the road. I'm not 100% sure that he was fully healthy just yet. I think you should start paying attention to Romeo Doubs. It's clear that he has a good connection with Jordan Love, and I think Doubs is going to continue to be a force in that lineup for the Packers this year. And in PPR leagues, 9 for 95. You had a really nice day if you put him into your lineup. Good to see Christian Watson getting out there, 2 catches for 25 yards and did have the touchdown. But didn't play a full allotment of snaps. Jaden Reed, the rookie, continuing to mix in there as well. So a nice showing by the Lions in that game. Sunday morning, over in London, we saw the Jaguars defeat the Atlanta Falcons 23-7. Just not a very great showing from the offense for Atlanta. But if you have Bijan Robinson on your teams, you're pretty happy because he carried the ball for 105 yards, got good opportunity running the football as he will continue to do. Definitely seeing Tyler Algier play the second fiddle role as we kind of all thought it should be coming into the season. But it's the 5 for 32 that gets me for Bijan Robinson as a receiver. Just really cool to see him continuing to mix in the pass game. He's going to be a PPR legend, and if he starts scoring touchdowns at a higher rate, which may not happen because the Falcons aren't going to be a high touchdown equity offense, but if he can mix in some more touchdowns, he's going to absolutely smash. Drake London scoring in London. Maybe this is the week you trade him because you could say, hey, he got double-digit points, but you're not going to see double digits every week out of London. It's just not going to happen in this Falcons offense. So, yep, I did say last week, if London ever scores, you trade him. I don't know if you can do it off of a 3 for 28, but that touchdown might boost people up and say, oh, the breakout is coming It's not coming. Arthur Smith will not allow it. Same as with Kyle Pitts, but I'm not even going to talk about Jonnu Smith. 6 for 95 when Kyle Pitts is down here at 2 for 21. That'll piss you right off, so we're just not going to talk about it. Trevor Lawrence, nothing special in this game. I still think brighter days are ahead for him for fantasy, but man, Calvin Ridley, lucky that he scored that touchdown because otherwise it was a really barren day and just not earning very many targets. It's just night and day from what we saw week 1 from Calvin Ridley. So kind of inexplicable, honestly, that it's going the way that it has for him. It's kind of unfortunate, I guess, if you don't have Calvin Ridley that he scored because we talked about him last week as a buy low candidate. I think if he hadn't scored the touchdown this week, there would be panic in the streets about Calvin Ridley from people that roster him, and you probably would have been able to get him on the cheap. Look, what do you believe about Trevor Lawrence? Well, if you believe like I do that he's a pretty good NFL quarterback, top 12 to 14 NFL quarterback, maybe higher, maybe a little bit lower depending on what we see from him, but largely I think he's a pretty good player. And if you believe that Calvin Ridley is a talent, it's just a matter of time, I think, before those two get on the same page and truly have a multi-week breakout together. So I feel like Calvin Ridley still in the buy zone, but you might not have as easy of a time as you would have if he was sitting there with just like one catch for 8 yards, had the 30-yard touchdown that boosts his fantasy production. So his owners, his managers may decide to hold on to him, but worth checking in if you think Calvin Ridley is interesting. Christian Kirk, good to see that he's continued to bounce back, but keep in mind there was no Zay Jones in this game. He's still out with an injury, and so when Zay Jones comes back, will he kind of resume the role that he had in week 1, or will Christian Kirk be the predominant number 2 on that team? Is definitely something to watch moving forward. Rams 29, Colts 23. This was a game that took overtime, and we saw Puka Nacua get his first NFL touchdown, and it comes as a walk-off as the Rams get to 2-2, beating the Colts in overtime. Puka's fantastic. Cooper Kupp is supposed to open up that 21-day practice window in his return from IR this week, and I don't know if he's going to play. Hopeful and optimistic is the language that we're hearing from Sean McVay. I'm going to say Cooper Kupp needs another week before they officially activate him, but watch those practice reports. Regardless, though, Puka Nacua is a talented player. He is a good football player. I think you're going to see Tutu Atwell probably be the guy that loses out a little bit more than Puka Nacua when Kupp returns, but it's just a simple math equation. If you've got somebody who is a dominant target and catches 9 balls for 163 yards and a touch in this game, and I think he leads the NFL in receptions, it's just been ridiculous volume, and you add Cooper Kupp, who is the volume king, life is going to change for Puka Nacua. Now, the bet that you would be making if you decide now is the time to sell Puka is that Cooper Kupp is going to come in and dominate targets. The bet you would be making if you would like to acquire Puka after Cooper Kupp returns because you believe he's going to continue to maintain, I would say it's a rough time right now to be a buyer of Puka. You might as well wait a week or two and see what it looks like when Kupp returns if you want to get him back, because I can almost guarantee he's not going to continue to be a top 10 wide receiver. Well, maybe not. He's been like the number 1 wide receiver in terms of volume, not having a lot of touchdowns. I can guarantee he's not going to still be a top 5 wide receiver. If Cooper Kupp is healthy, it's impossible. It is impossible. There's not enough volume to go around. And I think it could diminish Kupp a little bit. I traded for Kupp this past week. Traded Kyren Williams as part of the deal to do it. That's a guy that maybe you just should have bought in on by now, and could it be too late? Yeah, maybe. 25 carries for over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. He is the volume king. I don't understand it, but it's happening. I love seeing it as someone who covered Kyren Williams playing high school football in St. Louis when he was a youngster. Cool to see, but I am just surprised that it's almost like Sean McVay said, look, we've dealt with this Cam Akers thing for so long. We decided to trade him because we believe that Kyren Williams is a dog, and we're gonna ride him. And they trust him, and that's valuable. The opportunity in fantasy football is everything at the running back position, but Kyren Williams is also displaying that he's got NFL caliber talent. And Ronnie Rivers mixing in for 9 carries. This was the Kyren Williams show, and if he's getting those red zone and those goal line opportunities, man, it's going to be wheels up for Kyren Williams. He's going to be top 10 the rest of the year if this volume continues. The one question would be, for his size, is he capable physically of holding up under that workload for an entire year? I largely say yes. I think he's that kind of player that could. But that would be like you could just see the efficiency maybe begin to trickle away as the season goes along if he should kind of slow down from a physical standpoint, or maybe an injury could always happen. But for right now, the trade was a very big multiplayer trade that I put out, and I traded Kyren Williams along with a returning Jonathan Taylor. and some other players who weren't quite as prominent, but I think I had a good receiver mixed in there. I gave like 5 guys for 3 guys. I got Bijan Robinson, and it's like you can't really argue with getting Bijan Robinson. I think I traded Devontae Smith in the part of the trade that got me Cooper Kupp, so that was like a straight wide receiver swap. Kupp higher ceiling, lower floor because we don't know about his health. But I did get to up what I considered to be an upgraded tight end. Traded Waller for T.J. Hawkinson. Hawk had a bad week, and so did Kirk Cousins as my fantasy quarterback, but I wanted to get that stack. We'll talk about maybe when we get to that game whether that's a buy low opportunity because I think T.J. Hawkinson should remain a really good tight end option, but I guess we'll kind of see. Tyler Higbee, you could do a lot worse if he's on waivers. I dropped him in a league that I just had picked him up off the bench and decided to pick up a backup running back instead to try and grab some handcuffs. And honestly, Tyler Higbee in PPR should be around that 8 to 12 point range per week, and that's if he doesn't score. So it's kind of gross maybe, but I think it's realistic to say Tyler Higbee, if he's out there on your waiver wire and you're really desperate at tight end, he's probably a good answer. Anthony Richardson continuing to be a really good fantasy option because he throws a couple of touchdowns, was not efficient by any means through the air, but on the ground, he's going to get you 50 rushing yards and usually he's going to score. So he's going to end up as the obvious steal of redraft season. I'm usually in on the quarterback. Like last year, it was Justin Fields, Jalen Hurts. The year before, like the quarterback that has running tendencies and it should be obvious to everybody that he's going to explode. That was Anthony Richardson this draft season, and I didn't end up really getting enough of him in redraft as much as I probably should have. It's one of those deals where I started my draft season going, oh, he's just going to be the punt quarterback that I take in round 10 every time. But then you just start to fiddle around with some things, and you get really enamored with some of the running backs and wide receivers that you can take dart throws on in that range. And, as a result, Devon A-Chain was a great example. So it's not like I was always drafting bad players instead of targeting Anthony Richardson in my drafts that late. But, man, it kind of feels silly to pass on him when you're seeing him do what he's doing. It's just a impossibly good floor to know that he's going to get you 10-plus fantasy points from rushing most weeks. So that's great to see. Zach Moss continued to be involved in the running game, but without catching a reception, really kind of a disappointing fantasy day. So I feel like I did well in trading him away in the series of moves that I made this past week. But Richardson, yeah, wheels up for him without any doubt. Let's try and buzz through the rest of these games a little more quickly. I want to be in-depth, but I also want to not keep you guys for a full hour with these podcasts. But let me know what you guys like from the channel. I'll try to always cater my stuff to what the people are looking for. Not huge volume from Lamar Jackson because he didn't need it in a 28-3 win over the Browns, but a couple of touchdown passes had his fantasy managers feeling a little better about life, and the rushing touchdowns as well, finally returning to the game for Lamar. So, like, when your team scores 4 touchdowns and Lamar Jackson is involved in all of them, that's kind of what we remember from him in his MVP season. Mark Andrews, finally getting the breakout that we knew was coming. Like, I told people on this channel, draft the hell out of Mark Andrews, and if you can stack it with Lamar, great. Through 3 weeks, that was looking a little ugly. If you didn't bail out on us, you're thankful with the 25 fantasy points that Mark Andrews picked up for you in PPR leagues. Zay Flowers, man, he's going to be hit or miss. It looked really good for 3 weeks because he was getting so much volume, and I don't think Odell even played in this game either. But, again, Mark Andrews is the best pass catcher on this team. I love Zay Flowers and his talent, but he's going to almost need the 8 to 10 targets to be a great fantasy player every week. I traded away Zay Flowers in the redrafts that I had him because I felt like it was a good time to sell last week because somebody looks up and sees all the targets he was getting, all the catches he was having, and the fantasy points were double digits every week. That's not always going to be the case. I don't think he's like a sell or anything now, but I do think that realistically there are going to be weeks, just like there are with all wide receivers, where he sort of goes, 3 for 50 and doesn't get to the double-digit mark for fantasy points. So that is what it is from Zay Flowers, but I don't think it's anything to panic about by any means. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, a lot of calls for him when people didn't like the way Deshaun Watson was playing early. Yeah, 3 interceptions, very clearly not ready for this level. But I think he'll be somebody for Dynasty that you still keep an eye on. But he was kind of thrust in because of an injury to Deshaun Watson and didn't go well. I think he's got some rushing ability that can maybe help him, and if he can hone in on that a little bit better, he can have more success moving forward if he's needed to start again. But that was ugly from him and from the Browns offense. So I don't look too much into the struggles for Jerome Ford. Pierre Strong was efficient in the carries he had. Jerome Ford, I still think he's probably a buy, honestly, because there are going to be people who look at his name and look at his point total or his rushing total. The receptions kind of, if you're in PPR especially, change it because he still got you close to 10 points. But there's still, especially if you're in non-PPR, I think Jerome Ford's a great buy this week because there are people who look at his name and go, oh, this week proves that he was a flash in the pan and he's just not very good. I think he's still going to be kind of the predominant rusher on that team. And it's just going to be a question of what do you think of the Browns' offense moving forward? If you think better days are ahead when Deshaun Watson gets back, and I sort of do, then Ford you might be able to get for cheaper than you ever thought you could off of a kind of a lackluster week from him. Something that I definitely should mention, though, pulling this up, I believe, we're seeing Jerome Ford was injured during that game, came back into the game, but something to keep an eye on as we show you here the little clip here on the screen. If that was something that impacted him, he wasn't efficient regardless, but something to keep an eye on in terms of his availability moving forward. Pierre Strong, to me, would be a great pickup if Ford is unable to play because I think Kareem Hunt is still not going to necessarily be a workhorse guy. He'll probably catch some passes. Didn't catch any passes in this game, but he's kind of old and washed, right? Like I think Pierre Strong, not a great player, but opportunity is going to be the king. And I just don't know how much opportunity the Browns are going to give to Kareem Hunt. I think they needed him as like a insurance policy, but I don't know that he'll ever be a lead back if something should happen to Jerome Ford long term. Alexander Mattison, as we move on to the Vikings win over the Panthers 21-13. Mattison was really a rare bright spot in this offense because he was pretty efficient on the ground with what he was able to do. Didn't do anything really through the air, but looked better this week than he had in previous weeks. Kirk Cousins, though, weird game for him. Didn't get a chance to throw it around as much as he had been. I think that comes as a result of the Vikings defense playing pretty well, which you're against Panthers. Their offense isn't very good, so that was kind of to be expected. But it sort of cost his fantasy managers and just a couple of interceptions that didn't help you, especially if you have, as my league does, a penalty for pick sixes. That did not go very well for Cousins in terms of his fantasy day. Luckily, he still has Justin Jefferson and found him a couple of times for touchdowns. And JJ ended up with a big fantasy day as a result. If you're in PPR, I think he had like 26 points. So great to see from him. I am basically just flushing the TJ Hawkinson dud down the drain. It doesn't mean anything to me. Jordan Addison, I won't flush down the drain. I think he's probably a buy, though. Anytime somebody gooses and you believe in the talent, he's a buy that week. So I would be looking to get some Jordan Addison on my team. We'll talk about what makes sense to maybe trade for him in some of the videos Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of this week as we tend to tackle trade talks on those days. So get your questions in. If you want me to talk about any specific players, we'll look at the most traded players of the week on Yahoo. They have those trends. We can look at some of the deals being made so that you can know, all right, here's kind of what I should be targeting in these trades. These are reasons that you subscribe to the channel, by the way. Hit that subscribe button if you enjoy fantasy content that doesn't tell you, oh, start so-and-so because they're going to erupt. Like, I can give you my opinions on things, but it's mostly about how we can take advantage of the markets to be able to build better teams for the long run. A lot of the fantasy analysts kind of drive me crazy on Twitter, and then they get all upset about people calling them out on their egregious takes. It's hard to have egregious takes when you don't act like a buffoon. So not to, be that guy, but sometimes it just kind of goes, guys, if you just calm down a little bit and don't be so bombastic, people aren't going to rip you as much when you're wrong, because we don't know. When we analyze fantasy football, none of us know. And that can be an important thing to remember. So don't take it too hard. Let's talk about the Panthers, though. Adam Thielen, I think, is a real thing. Has trust, whether it's been Andy Dalton or Bryce Young in the lineup. Thielen has gotten opportunities. So if you're in PPR, it's great. And I'm kind of wishing I had some more Adam Thielen on my teams. But I basically counted him out before this year, and that was a mistake. That was something that I shouldn't have allowed to do. Outside of a few best ball drafts, I think I'm pretty barren when it comes to Adam Thielen. And right now, I don't know what it would take to get him on your team, but I think he's going to be pretty safe as like a wide receiver 3 type, especially in PPR. I bet I could pick him up in trades this week. I might try to grab, because he was my guy, man. Back when he was with the Vikings, I always loved having him on my teams. Kind of like very similar, in my mind, similar to Tyler Lockett, who is my favorite player, as I've talked about on this channel, where he's just going to make the plays. He's not going to drop passes. He's tough. He's hard-nosed. He's going to find the hole in the zone defense. He's just a very savvy receiver. And even at his age, Adam Thielen signed a multi-year contract with the Panthers, and I kind of thought, wow, I mean, good for him for getting the bag, kind of after Minnesota said we don't want you anymore. but I didn't know how that was going to pan out for Carolina. It looks like it's going to pan out okay because I think he's a player that has enough savvy in his game that he's going to age gracefully. So Adam Thielen might be a buy in dynasty leagues as well, because dynasty managers are going to look at the age, and if you play dynasty, you know how it goes. People really hyperfixate on age, and sometimes within a season, you can go, I might actually grab this guy from someone to help me win now and worry about him dropping off the age curve, after this year. Something to think about. If you can get him for on the cheap, I think I would try to do that. Bad day for Miles Sanders. Chuba Hubbard got more than half the carries. That was weird. I'm not too invested in Miles Sanders or Chuba Hubbard anyway, but if they split 50-50 of a bad offense, it's just going to be really hard to want to trust those guys. So is Miles Sanders a buy off of this week? Yeah, maybe, because he just didn't get you much for fantasy points. But again, I'm not really giving up players that I like, young upside players long-term, to get Miles Sanders onto my team. He could be somebody that if you have him, you mark down, hey, maybe I do want to sell Miles Sanders after his next big game. Because, again, the volume in this offense, the Panthers I don't think are going to be very good offensively, and they haven't been so far. It's going to continue. So it's not always going to be wonderful to have Miles Sanders if he's now sharing the workload with Chuba. But I do believe Miles was a little banged up this week, so maybe that was why they lowered his workload. Something to keep in mind there. Terrace Marshall, 9 catches. I don't ever know what to do with Terrace Marshall because I feel like I had him for Dynasty. I gave up on him, and then every 4 weeks he pops for a big game. We'll see. I'm not really buying into it just yet, but he's a decently talented player. I liked him out of LSU. Speaking of coming out of LSU and being decent at football, Joe Burrow used to be. I don't know what's happened. The Bengals lose 27-3 to the Titans, and Burrow looks broken. This offense looks broken. I don't know what fixes it, but I am officially in panic mode on Joe Burrow because for me, he was like a top 7 quarterback coming into the year that I said if you get a guy in this first 7, you're doing okay. And no, if you have Joe Burrow, I do on a dynasty team. I traded for him because I stacked him with Jamar Chase, and I was like, I don't even have to think about this, and I was wrong. And I might have to bench Joe Burrow this week for just somebody off the wire. It's a concern until he shows otherwise. I thought the Bengals would beat the Titans, and they didn't even come close. Jamar Chase had an okay day. Everybody else, poo. T. Higgins, I don't know if you can even abandon ship at this point on T. Higgins, so you probably should just hold on until he has a big game because he's a talented guy. He'll probably eventually have a good game. But it could be kind of like Allen Robinson from last year. And that would be really gross because T. Higgins is a much younger and more talented player. But I think it's kind of a disgruntled situation. The offense is bad. T. Higgins, I don't know that he's like a me first guy. I'm not trying to say that. But he has a contract coming up, and I don't know. I don't know with T. Higgins, man. I don't have a lot of him. I don't have shares of him. But if you do, I could see being a little bit concerned about that. A lot of it concerned about that situation. But right now, off of a 2 for 19, you might just have to hold on. Unless you can get fair value. Maybe that would be a guy that we talk about. Hey, you're going to try to sell low because it might go even lower. I don't normally think that about talented elite players, but you never know. Derrick Henry, on the other side, throws a touchdown in this game, which helped for his fantasy day. Remember last week when I did the video on Derrick Henry and said he was a buy? There were people that were getting Derrick Henry for crazy cheap prices. I got Derrick Henry for a price that wasn't crazy cheap because I included Devon Achane in it. But like I said, that's my roster that now has Bijan at that running back spot, so I can't really complain. But Derrick Henry, if you bought in last week like we told you to do, good on you because he was right back to his normal workload. In the moment, it is so easy to paint a picture. It is so easy to paint a narrative of, this is the end of Derrick Henry. Last week when he completely sucked, it was so easy to go, I'm risk averse. I think I need to get out of this situation. When in reality, he is still Derrick Henry, and the Titans, something to remember, lost badly in the game last week. And what did I say on one of the videos? They lost, and so won't they come back this week with a new game plan to say, how do we get better offensively? Well, let's give our best offensive player the ball more. And they did, and look what happened. They dominated the Bengals. So these are if you didn't get to take advantage of it, that's okay. There will be more opportunities like this, and I'll dig into them tomorrow. This is what we're doing the channel for. You can find these players. Will you have a 100% hit rate? No. Derrick Henry could have come out and had another lackluster week, but he didn't because he's Derrick Henry. Throws a touchdown, 120 yards, a touchdown on the ground, only one catch for 11 yards, but man, what a what a heist if you were able to get like a Zach Moss plus something for Derrick Henry last week. And people were doing that. I was having people in my comments on YouTube saying, hey, here's what I am receiving for Henry. And a lot of times I said, yeah, probably buy. There were a couple that I said, yeah, you got to consider what you believe about Derrick Henry. Don't let me, I'm a stranger on the internet. Don't let me tell you what you need to do with your fantasy team. Decide a take. My take is I'm going to plant my flag on Derrick Henry because over the course of the last decade, that's been a pretty good flag plant. And you know what? If it worked and you decided that was your take and you were able to get him, you're pretty happy today. So now is he a sell high? This is why we play fantasy football. Now is he a sell high? Maybe, but he also might just be a ride it out and enjoy yourself for the rest of the way. I'm a little bit jealous though that I did all the moves that I did to upgrade all the way to Bijan, who I'd rather have than Henry, I think. But at the same time, it's like, man, I missed out on the King Henry week after making a trade for him. That's my own thing though. I do too many trades in a given week, and it always ends up kind of, you're going to have mixed feelings when you trade as often as I do. Tampa Bay 26-9 over the Saints. It was a nightmare offensively for New Orleans. I don't know that Derek Carr should have been playing. He did okay in terms of like didn't throw a pick, but he was really bad. Jameis Winston was really bad. 0-for-1 with a pick. Kamara though coming back like hello, 13 receptions for 33 yards, incredibly inefficient. The offense was terrible, but if this is what the quarterbacks are going to do, just dump it to Alvin Kamara, you're going to be really happy in a PPR league if you have Alvin Kamara. He can give you 50 yards on the ground and 30 yards through the air, but if he's getting you 6 or 7 receptions, this week he got 13. He's not going to always do that. But he's going to be stable, real stable. Try to buy him, I guess, if you can, because it's not like for fantasy he went too insane. He had like 21 points, didn't score. There will be a game, though, where he inexplicably catches like 2 balls and doesn't do much, especially if the Saints keep kind of struggling. So maybe you wait to buy. But I would, if I can sell Alvin Kamara this week off of the promise of 13 receptions in a game where they were heavily negative game script, that's probably smart to do because you could, with the name Alvin Kamara, because a lot of it is name recognition, right? If Kyron Williams puts up Alvin Kamara numbers, you're going to feel differently about it than if Alvin Kamara doesn't. And so that can color what you can get back in a trade. And I honestly think Alvin Kamara, off of this week, 20 points, people just go, oh, he's Alvin Kamara, this is perfect. I don't think he's going to be a top 5 running back. That's what we know Alvin Kamara to always be in the past because he's just a freak and a pass-catching fiend and does awesome. I don't think he'll quite be on that level. He'll probably be like a low, maybe real low-end RB1 or high-to-mid RB2. That's possible. It's also possible that this was pure game script, and he's not going to get 13 catches, so when he doesn't, can he be efficient enough on the ground or can he score touchdowns to be good for fantasy? I don't know, but I think as an RB2, a very stable floor, if that's what you're looking for in your lineup, Kamara's probably a solid guy to go get because the RB position's been bad. Like this year, you just look week on week. How many guys actually score double digits? It's less than you'd think. It's usually not 24 guys doing it. So I honestly think Kamara is going to be an interesting topic. Maybe he's somebody we talk about more this week. Not even going to talk about Chris Olave. He'll be better. But he's a huge buy this week, Chris Olave for me, because the talent is real. So where were we? Oh, yeah, Dolphins, Bills. Devon A-Chain, I mentioned him. He's a dude. Yeah, he's a dude. It may be too late to buy him, but I'd buy him like he's a top 20 RB. I'd buy him like he's a top 15 RB because he could be a top 3 RB. Right now he is. Yeah, throw me some names. It's hard to tell you whether I'd be buying Devon A-Chain or selling because there's still not a lot of opportunities, only 8 carries for 101 yards. But he's going to do that. And if he gets 3 receptions a game, he's usually going to get more than 19 yards. He's talented. Fascinating stuff. Tyreek Hill is Tyreek Hill. Not a great game. If ever you want to try to buy Tyreek Hill, this is the week to do it. He didn't score, 20 points, 30 points, 50 points. So you might as well send the offers out because you will rarely have games worse than this from Tyreek Hill. He is very, very safe for fantasy. Jalen Waddle, is he a buy? I mean, he might do this more often because Tyreek Hill is going to dominate the workload. Braxton Berrios had a day, and that happens sometimes. But I'm not really chasing that for fantasy. Buy Tyreek Hill this week. That might be, and people are going to click that video, so I probably have to make that video of like, can you feasibly buy Tyreek Hill? Or do the people that have him tell you to shove off? I would argue that 98 out of 100 Tyreek Hill fantasy managers this week are going to tell you to shove off. But there are going to be 2. There are going to be 2 people out there that don't out of every 100. And that means you get to have Tyreek Hill on your team for the rest of the year. If one person goes, they were bad. It's not universal, but it's possible that you could get him for cheaper than you otherwise could. Or let's not even say get him on the cheap. Just get him. Because I was sending out offers for Tyreek Hill that were like outlandish in recent weeks. And the guy's like, I'm just not trading him. You can send me anything you want. I'm not trading him. And I think that after a week where he doesn't score 10, that would be your only opportunity to at least trade for him. And you're still like spending a bunch to get him. But is there a world in which somebody out there decides to trade him? Yeah, fantasy managers are fickle. He only had 3 catches. But it'll probably be really tough to do. We'll still talk about it. Josh Allen was awesome. Stephon Diggs was awesome. Gabe Davis made you happy with the touchdown. Inefficient day from James Cook, but he found the end zone and had the huge reception for 48 yards. So that's basically like a touchdown. In PPR, 5.8 fantasy points there. A touchdown here. Pitch in a couple of rushing yards. Perfectly acceptable day from James Cook. I would continue to buy him probably because I think he's just going to be great because that offense is going to be great. All right, let's try to get through the latter 7 games that we have here in the next. What can we do? Can we do this in 15 minutes? Let's try. Bears-Broncos, I thought could be a high-scoring game. I had the over in this game, and that ended up hitting. Russell Wilson doing a nice enough job. I was bummed. Javonte Williams, I'm big on him, and he got hurt. We'll see what the injury is for him. Hopefully nothing long-term, but Jaleel McLaughlin is going to be a huge waiver guy. We'll do maybe some waiver talk on Tuesday. Huge waiver guy if we get some info about Javonte Williams' injury being long-term. The receivers, we saw Jerry Jeudy and Phillip Lindsay getting into it on Twitter. Didn't have a great game. Cortland Sutton had the touchdown, so it kind of saves his day. Jeudy just very bland. Marvin Mims continues to be like a freak in terms of yards per reception, yards per route run. They just don't let him run routes. I don't understand it, Sean Payton. What are you doing? Trade for Marvin Mims now because there will inevitably have to come a point where he's getting the usage that these other receivers who aren't performing are getting. And when that happens, he's going to be just exceptional. So I would trade for Marvin Mims this week. You could probably trade a bench player to do it because, again, he's just not getting a lot of work, and people might be freaking out about that. Jaleel McLaughlin, yeah, we'll talk about him on waivers Tuesday if it turns out we learn more about the injury to Javonte. Justin Fields, bounce back game, man. If you had Justin Fields and you stuck with him, you're happy because he looked really good. Now, will he every week? No. The Broncos stink, and Justin Fields took advantage. DJ Moore, probably time to sell. 27 fantasy points. He's not going to do that every week. He'll do it 4 times a year. But the other 13 games, you might be kind of going, DJ Moore, what do I think of him? Can I trust him in my lineup? Depends on what you think of Justin Fields. So this is an example where you have a player take and you ride with it. My player take is that Cole Kmet had an awesome day. I mean, I wish I had some Cole Kmet. People are going to flock to waiver wires and to trades to get him. We try to remind me in the YouTube comments to include Cole Kmet on Wednesday or whenever later this week I go to Yahoo and look at the most traded players. I am going to be fascinated to see, like, is someone out there going to get Travis Kelce for Cole Kmet this week? Probably not, but crazier things have happened. Maybe not. But that's the ultimate. If you got Cole Kmet on your team, you got to sell him. Like, would I trade Cole Kmet for TJ Hawkinson? Probably should. This is one of those that in a week when Kmet goes back to being Kmet and Hawkinson goes back to being Hawkinson with the volume in Minnesota. And if I would have said, no, don't trade Kmet for Hawkinson, it would feel like last week saying, no, don't trade Zach Moss for Derrick Henry. Because, of course, you make that trade. Do you trade Kmet for Hawkinson? Absolutely, I do. But I think Kmet could be a stable back-end tight end 1 the rest of the season because just sometimes when those quarterbacks struggle and they need somebody they can trust and they find that guy, they don't let go. So Justin Fields may not let go of him. He might hug him the rest of the year. The Eagles tried to lose to the Manders. Didn't happen. Jalen Hurts, good passing day. Didn't score a rushing touchdown. That was unusual. But he was fine for fantasy. DeAndre Swift is going to continue to be like the top 20 running back and maybe like end of season. I say top 20, and then I look at his numbers like, 56 yards, touchdown. That's better at the running back position than you think when you can add 6 points via the air, 4 for 23 receiving. He's probably going to be an RB1 this year when all is said and done if he stays healthy. So if you're in on DeAndre Swift, This is why zero RB works, because he was like, I don't know, like round 4, round 5 maybe. And that's not really zero RB. If he slipped into round 6, he would have been. But it's just, sometimes it's easy as it is. Just grab the talented players in the mid rounds that are running backs, and you'll probably be fine. A.J. Brown's a dude. Devontae Smith is a dude. Smith didn't score, so it doesn't look as great. He might be a buy as a result, but still at 15 points, so pretty good from him. Commanders, yeah, Sam Howell looked a little better in this game. I don't know what it does for this offense moving forward, but he did look better. Brian Robinson was inefficient, but he scored. Terry McLaurin, you got to have a take on Sam Howell to decide how you handle McLaurin. He'll probably be fine. Like, he's going to get a good number of games where if the script is right, he can give you 8 for 86, and that's a nice day. I am intrigued by Curtis Samuel only because I picked him up in a league where I sold in everything I had basically to have a Mahomes, Hurts, Superflex stack, and Curtis Samuel was on waivers, so I picked him up. And if they want to use him like Deebo Samuel by giving him rushing attempts, I won't be mad. He scores a rushing touchdown this week, but Curtis Samuel was like somewhat relevant. I don't know if that's sustainable or not, but I think with the way that you view things in Washington, he could be that kind of dynamic guy that mixes in as a wide receiver behind McLaurin. Jahan Dotson, disappointing, but he scored. So I don't really know what to make of that, but it's just been a tough go for Jahan Dotson so far this year. 10 fantasy points is like we're throwing a parade for him. So that was this week. The Steelers are so bad, Matt Canada needs to be fired. Najee Harris had a 32-yard reception, and he scored double-digit points, so you probably sell him this week. I'm very low on Najee Harris just because I'm low on the Steelers' offense. Jaylen Warren, inefficient, didn't do much. Eventually, we need to remember, though, that an NFL season is 17 weeks long. I almost said 27. NFL season is 17 weeks long, and it can be hard to remember what happened in week 4 when you get to the playoffs for fantasy. There's a world in which, in the fantasy playoffs, the Steelers' offense looks better, and whichever running back is the lead dog between Najee and Jaylen Warren, we're going, oh, baby, this guy's winning people leagues. So, like, just remember, if you still believe in a player, like, this is more of a Jaylen Warren take. He is still getting receiving volume and didn't kill you for fantasy. 10 points is okay, especially when you're going 0 RB and you're loaded at wideout like I like to have my teams be. You can live with that. Jaylen Warren, just kind of keep him in mind. I think it's a good guy that at some point you want to trade for him before the breakout happens. But the Steelers' offense would have to be better. And I don't know if that's coming in 2023, but it could. I would never be starting Jaylen Warren unless I was in a really deep league or desperate, even in bye weeks. But having him on my bench, there are worse ways to spend a bench bat. So I would kind of maybe think about Jaylen Warren still because he's a good player. George Pickens is a good player, but he's got to rely on Kenny Pickett, and that sucks. C.J. Stroud is a good player. Texans, man, they're cooking. 2-2. Is that as many games as they won all of last year? Dameon Pierce, getting a lot of opportunity. Good to see. Nico Collins is the guy that I traded away that I thought, oh, my wide receiver core is so deep. I have Nico Collins on my bench. I can just, trade him for, upgrading my bench a little bit, getting a guy that I want to kind of plant my flag on. I think Zach Charbonnet was part of the deal. Yeah, I got cooked by Nico Collins this week. Traded him to the guy that I played against, and I'm going to lose as a result. He was awesome. And I think, man, this Texans offense is really going to be good more often than it's not. So what I would do is Nico Collins, you trade him away probably for a legit wide receiver 1. Like, I'm trying to think of a name because Diggs went off this week. A.J. Brown went off this week. But if there's somebody in that tier that didn't go off this week, like you're not getting Tyreek Hill for Nico Collins. But if there's somebody in that kind of wide receiver 5 to 12 range that you can get, I would consider that. Collins could be a top 15 wide receiver rest of season, but this also could just be a day where he went crazy and Tank Dell didn't get as much of the looks. He only had 1 catch for 16. I think Tank Dell is going to be a target guy often moving forward too. Probably trade for Tank Dell this week. Trade him away. Now you try to trade for him. But when it comes to Nico Collins, man, like that's a really impressive game that he had. 2 touchdowns, 30 some odd fantasy points. If you have him in best ball, you're probably really cooking with it. I don't know. That's an interesting one because he could just do that all year, but more often than not, the guys who aren't elite names at the position, only a few of those guys are going to become elite names that matches a Diggs or a A.J. Brown or whatever you have. So that's really kind of a tricky one for me. Nico Collins, I think, is probably top 24 wide receiver for sure. But is he top 12? And is there a guy in the top 12 that you could get right now for him? Maybe. Chargers 24, Raiders 17. Aiden O'Connell, very nondescript day. Josh Jacobs, very good day because of having the backup quarterback, Aiden O'Connell, throwing the ball to him 8 times. Even with that, though, Devontae Adams was able to have a fine day. He's probably going to be good all year. Devontae Adams is very clearly still got it. And I don't know. This might be one of his lesser games. So maybe trade for Adams right now if you think you can upgrade. Josh Jacobs, though, if you were still in on him waiting for the breakout, this was an encouraging day. It was not a big day for Herbert through the air, but he scored twice on the ground, so he didn't care. Receiving-wise, was disappointed. I started Quentin Johnston in a deep league thinking maybe without Mike Williams, he could take a step forward. He didn't. Josh Palmer, I mean, the volume was just, there just wasn't a lot of it. They ran the heck out of the ball in this game. Herbert was largely responsible for that. So you just kind of throw it away. Keenan Allen scored. Otherwise, he would have been like the top buy low. He may still be a reasonable buy low because he's going to get more volume than he did in this game most weeks. I still think you can take a shot on Quentin Johnston because people are going to look at him not having a good game in the first game without Mike Williams, and they're going to completely give up on him. You could probably get him for dirt cheap, and I'm still going to be a long-term believer in what he brings to the table. Darius Davis, though, showing some juice in this game as well, getting a couple of rushing attempts and breaking one of those attempts for a 51-yard gain. Alrighty, we're getting toward the end here. Let's plow through the last 3 games that we have to talk about. This always does end up taking a while, but you want to take a look in the box scores of everything and see what you may have missed on Sunday. Niners beating the Cardinals, not a surprise to anybody. James Conner, let's see what he did. Didn't receive the ball at all, so might be a buy on James Conner, a very soft buy mode on James Conner because the volume's still going to be good. But we know that there are going to be weeks like this for the Cardinals where they're just not very good. Michael Wilson had a huge game. Have him in a Best Ball Mania lineup that is cooking right now, and that was cool to see him catch a couple of touchdowns. Marquise Brown is it feels like it's gross to people to have him, but he's going to continue to get you PPR. He's going to be 14 to 17 points almost every week. So if you think that you can buy him, you wouldn't say, oh, you're going to buy him low because he just had a good game, but he's just had the same game 4 times. I think you could honestly, and this was actually more encouraging because he didn't score a touchdown to get to his 15 points, his 17 points. He did it on volume. And that to me is more predictive than, oh, he happened to score a touchdown in this game. So Marquise Brown, if he's in a tier, I know on Fantasy Pros, last week he was wide receiver 39 in the rest of season rankings. It's egregious. He's going to be top 30 for sure. So it may be a little bit gross, but that might be the reason you might be able to get him. If you need some reliability at wide receiver 3 in your lineup, go get Hollywood Brown. I don't know what you give up to get him, but I think it's not going to change week to week. It's not going to be, oh, he had a great week, so now I can't buy him. I can't afford him. No, I think people are still always going to be willing to trade him because they're going to see that Cardinals offense and they're going to go, I don't want to be involved in that. They're going to be looking for reasons to get rid of Hollywood Brown. I used him as a kicker in the trade that I was able to facilitate last week when I got Derrick Henry. I was like, I think it's great to get Henry, but if I can get Hollywood Brown too, I know that I can use him as a trade chip to upgrade my team, and that's what I went and did, and then I just continued to move until I got Cooper Kupp out of that wide receiver spot, basically. Hollywood was my flex spot, or I think he was actually my first bench wide receiver because I was pretty deep at wideout, and now I was able to basically know that when push comes to shove, I'm going to have Cooper Kupp in that spot as long as he's healthy. If not, I probably wish I had Hollywood Brown still. Anyway, moving on to the 49ers. McCaffrey, he probably won't have a week where he doesn't just smash. He was the correct 1-1 over Justin Jefferson, by the way. That ends up being the answer, unless he gets hurt. His volume is just outrageous, and he's going to score. I don't even know as a sports book, what could you put the line at for him to score or not? Minus 350? It's just ridiculous. For him to score twice should be even odds. He's just going to do it every freaking game. I say this as somebody who doesn't have him, and it's annoying. He scored 4 touchdowns, dude. He put up wide receiver 1 numbers as a receiver, 7 for 71 and 1. That's 20 fantasy points. And then he put up, what did he put up as a runner? God, this guy's ridiculous. 28 as a runner, combined for 50 points, basically. He's stupid good, and the volume is just going to be there because why would you do anything different? I mean, he is unbelievable. All right, enough of that rant. Brandon Ayuk is the wide receiver 1, though. Deebo Samuel, I don't know if he left this game with an injury or what. My dog didn't even get a target? What happened? Did Deebo get hurt? What the hell? Yeah, I know he was coming in with the knee issue, and it was very clear that they must have just limited his snaps. I didn't see a snap count on him, but buy Deebo Samuel this week, because once his knee gets better, he's still Deebo. But Brandon Ayuk it's crazy to think about a couple years ago him being in the Shanahan doghouse to where he is now. Like, he's a dude. Brock Purdy is efficient. He's the perfect quarterback for that team. I love Trey Lance. I wish he would have gotten a chance. But they just need a game manager because they have weapons everywhere. They just need him to not make mistakes. Oh, cool. Bailey Zappi got into the game. I didn't even know he was involved in that. I did not pay attention to the end of this Cowboys-Patriots game. The Cowboys took it to him 38-3. Another game that I think I read pretty well this week in the NFL. Not a great homecoming for Zeke. Didn't really do much on the ground. Nothing through the air. Ramondre Stevenson is a buy for me this week. He's probably one of the best buys at the running back position because he had a ton of volume, just wasn't efficient. Didn't do anything through the air, but he will usually do more than that. This was just a weird game. You lose by 35. You don't really worry about getting, committing to the end to get Ramondre Stevenson the ball. But they still gave it to him 14 times. He's going to be a buy this week. Remind me in YouTube comments if I don't talk about him tomorrow that I need to. On the Cowboys side, it was kind of disappointing for fantasy because the defense was just so great. Dak didn't do a ton, but, did everything. 28 for 34. He was very, very solid and efficient. Tony Pollard was good. 47 yards. Did a little through the air. I guess he wasn't that good. Shit. It's a buy Tony Pollard week. All right. What do you know? Yeah, you got to slam by Tony Pollard. You'll never have a chance to do it again. You may not even this week, but with 4.3 fantasy points through the air and only 4.7 on the ground, he's below 10. Go get him. Deuce Vaughn, my guy, didn't look good. Jake Ferguson, I talked about Cole Kmet at tight end. Jake Ferguson is kind of similar to that, where he could just volume his way and be trusted by his quarterback. CD scored, so I don't know if he's still in the buy territory, if he's going to be that easy to get, because he was kind of lackluster in the game last week against Arizona. This week, 13 points if you count the touchdown in PPR, so that's not crazy. Like, you could probably get CeeDee Lamb. I might try to get CeeDee Lamb in one of my leagues this week. I don't know who I would trade away to get him, but I still view him as like, there's not probably 10 wide receivers I'd rather have than CeeDee. There might not even be 6 that I'd rather have. So that might be foolish because like Devontae Adams needs to be above Lamb, and I don't know if I had it that way before. But Lamb's probably still someone that I would be buying just because I very much do believe in the talent. And the Dallas offense just wasn't needed in this game. It's kind of like their week 1 40-0 win over the Giants. They didn't really need to use those guys. All right, let's talk Sunday Night Football before we get out of here. Mahomes looked kind of bad. I don't know what happened, but he's still Mahomes' way and had that big rushing attempt to get the first down. Everybody was crying for a hold on the Chiefs' offensive line. I don't think there was a hold. The defender just looked like he was a fish out of water trying to get a holding call instead of trying to get to the quarterback. That was kind of pathetic. I do not believe that was a hold, personally. Mahomes, though, threw a couple of weird interceptions. He looked like he was just like all armed, didn't like have his legs in it. You wonder if the ankle is part of that. But it's probably a blip on the radar. For fantasy, he got you 50 yards rushing, so that's fine. No touchdown for Kelsey in front of T. Swift at MetLife Stadium, but no big deal. Isaiah Pacheco was really the hero of this game for the Chiefs. Did a little bit of a mix-in for the receiving game and was great on the ground. It's so funny to watch him run because there's so much wasted motion. People say, you talk about the running backs when they just, there's no wasted motion. Isaiah Pacheco is the opposite of that. I saw that tweet last night, and I was like, yeah, that's kind of true. He runs like I don't know. It's so hard to describe, but he's just like, everything is moving, and he's not really going that fast, but he's a hard-nosed player. I like Isaiah Pacheco. Anything else from the Chiefs side of things? Noah Gray caught a touchdown, whatever. That's usually going to be Kelsey, so just it's not fantasy relevant. There's no wide receiver that you can trust for fantasy weekly in your lineup in the Chiefs. You can't. There will be one that always does well. Today there wasn't. But usually there will be one that does well. It's always going to be somebody different, and it's usually going to be just Travis Kelce. So I would have some guys on my bench because if a Kadarius Toney or a Sky Moore strings together a couple consecutive weeks where he looks good, then you can probably trade high on that. But I would never want to risk starting a guy unless I'm in a really deep league. Like I had to start Sky Moore next to Mahomes in my Superflex that I talked to you guys about, but that's not something that I am excited about doing. Not moving forward. I got to trade Sky Moore, but I don't think there's any way to do it. Jets side of things, Zach Wilson played well. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. He played well. It'll probably be his best game of the year, but he played well, which meant good things for Garrett Wilson. Lazard catching the touchdown. They both had 15 fantasy points. And Breece Hall he looked good, man. I wish they'd give him the ball more. 6 for 56. But they were kind of down 17-0 early, so they couldn't stick to the run as much as they would have. But Breece Hall, to me, it might sound crazy, but I think he's still a buy. 3 catches for 13, 56 yards, got about 10 fantasy points. I think he's a buy to me still because the talent's real. So I wouldn't want to start him until I see it play out for a little bit, but I don't know, man. I think that he can be sustained for fantasy. They just got to get to that point. If Zach Wilson plays like he did last night, he'll remain the starter. I was kind of thinking before this week Trevor Siemian was going to take that job. They signed him to the practice squad, but I think Zach Wilson did a lot for himself. The fumble really sucked. I thought the snap was weird. I made the joke that Connor McGovern, the Jets center, who is a Mizzou guy, which, not far from Kansas City, Missouri, where the Chiefs play. I thought maybe he was a sleeper agent, kind of throwing a slider on the snap there to Zach Wilson, but you gotta catch the ball. And Zach Wilson said as much in the post game, so whatever. But I thought he played well, so maybe deserves some credit. But he lost the game. Chiefs win. All right, that's gonna do it for this wrap up of Week 4 in the NFL. When it comes to the Sunday games, we'll talk Monday Night Football, maybe on a video Tuesday if there's anything to note from that game. Seahawks Giants tonight. I'm playing some props. I like the rushing props for Seattle. I think Zach Charbonnet is a guy. I told you all this past week to buy him. If he's on your waiver wire, please pick him up. And here's why. Especially if you're watching before Monday Night Football and you can actually pick him up. If you're on Sleeper or Yahoo, ESPN won't let you, but you can drop players from your bench that have already played this week in most leagues. So if Charbonnet is out there, first of all, you should always be picking up the Monday night handcuffs if you've got an open spot on your bench. Just pick up the backups. If you're in a super flex league, pick up the backup quarterback. Because remember, Aaron Rodgers got injured. I had Zach Wilson on my fantasy team that week, was able to parlay him into another quarterback, was able to parlay him into Jalen Hurts. Like, you want to be using these strategies if you can. But especially if you're not in super flex, the backup running back thing is very easy to do. And Charbonnet is one that's like getting work. He got 46% of snaps last week, 9 for 46. I am over 24.5 yards for him tonight. On a player prop. I am hopeful that he's able to do that. We'll talk about it. Obviously, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I'm not going to tell you he's a guarantee to hit anything because we got to remember it's what drives people crazy about the so-called fantasy experts. We're not experts. We don't know. But we can project and talk about why we think something will happen, and then we can reflect on it and evaluate what went wrong if we were incorrect about our take or what went right if we nailed it. So that's my take for tonight. Let's see Zach Charbonnet get some rushing yards, but I think Kenneth Walker goes over as well, and I think Kenneth Walker probably finds the end zone. I'm also thinking both quarterbacks throw a pick tonight. DJ might, Geno might not, but I think I'm going to play that. And let's see a sack for Kayvon Thibodeau. Just give you guys a little bit of player prop stuff to wrap up this episode. Thank you guys so much for listening. Subscribe to the channel. There will be a lot of trade talk, valuable stuff on the videos that we make throughout the week, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss them. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time on the channel. Peace.